All right, take it away.
Hey guys, welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we have a debate between Kent Hovind and Robert Rowe. We're talking about Noah's flood. The format will be, we'll have a 20-minute opening statement from each debater. We'll have a 10 to 15-minute rebuttal, and then the rest of the time will be cross-examination or open discussion, however they want to do it. So I'm not sure who's going first. I think it's Kent, who's defending the global flood, while Robert will be defending a localized flood. So Kent, you have 20 minutes.
Oh, we got everything. All right. Thank you for.
I can't see you. I can't see you. You're not sharing.
Can't see me. Okay, nothing is showing, Steve. He says.
We don't have the video on.
We don't have a video on here. Just audio, huh?
Yep.
But I can turn this on, right? Right now.
Yeah. You can broadcast your slides.
Yeah.
So I can show some slides anyway. There we go.
Okay.
Click that and share that.
Yep.
Okay. This is a little over my head, all this stuff. Okay. So 408. Okay. Well, my name's Kent Hovind. I taught high school science for 15 years, science and mathematics. I believe the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate. I think the Bible clearly teaches it was a worldwide flood in the days of Noah for obvious scientific and spiritual reasons. So the idea that the flood was just a local flood, I think, does not hold up to certainly scriptural review or scientific review. There have been thousands and thousands of localized floods. That's not the question. But there was a global flood in the days of Noah. When I moved to Pensacola in January of 1989, the neighbor kid asked if I would like to take the newspaper since he threw the paper. And I had been teaching science and math 15 years and moved there to put my wife through college. I said, no, I don't want the paper because I don't have a parakeet. And he said, well, if I have an extra one, can I throw it in your yard? Maybe I can talk you into it. And I said, sure. So he threw a paper in the yard one day, and the article was in there that said dinosaur bones are found in Montana from 80 million years ago or something like that. Typical propaganda. And so I wrote my first ever letter to the editor. I said, no, these dinosaur bones are not 80 million years old. These are bones from one that drowned in the flood in the days of Noah. The earth is not millions of years old. The Bible clearly teaches the earth is about 6,000 years old total, and there was a flood in the days of Noah about 4,400 years ago that completely destroyed the planet except for those on board Noah's Ark. And they published my letter to the editor in the local Pensacola News Journal, and then that started a war in Pensacola with people writing letters back and forth, and I answered. And finally, after several weeks or months of that, I don't remember how long, I think it was several months, the local university, University of West Florida, some of their students called me and said, hey, we're reading all your letters to the editor in our anthropology class, and we'd like to know if you'd like to debate our professor, anthropology professor. I said, well, I've never had a debate in my life except with my wife, and I lose those every time, but sure. So I did my first ever debate. This would have been about 1990, I think. And there were about 1,000 people in attendance, and I defended the position that the earth is 6,000 years old. It was destroyed by a flood in the days of Noah, and Jesus is going to come back and judge the world again soon. In 2 Peter chapter 3, it tells us in the Bible that in the last days there will be scoffers who will not understand or deny the idea that there was a creation or a flood or a coming judgment. And so I've written and talked. That debate led to a full-time ministry where I travel and speak on those topics all over the world, defending the position that the Bible is true and the evolution theory is silly. Now, I believe if you look at the Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, I think the Bible clearly teaches there was a canopy of ice, probably 2 or 3 inches thick. And I only base that number on what the Jews have always taught. They said it was 3 fingers thick. A canopy of ice above the atmosphere, probably suspended by air pressure like a big inflatable building, or magnetic field, because super cold ice becomes magnetic. I don't know, 300 to 400 below 0 Fahrenheit. It laminates into hydrogen-oxygen layers, change different crystalline structure, and it becomes magnetic and fiber optic, and a lot of interesting things happen to ice at extremely low temperatures. But whatever held it up there, the Bible clearly says there was water above the firmament in Genesis chapter 1, and it tells us the firmament is where the birds fly in Genesis 1:21. So the first chapter is telling us that there was water above the firmament, and that's now gone. It fell down at the time of the flood. It probably did not add much to the flood. Most of the water for the flood would have come from inside the earth. There are 3 references in the Bible to water being in the crust of the earth. Psalm 24, verse 1 and 2, Psalm 33, and Psalm 136 all talk about the earth containing huge amounts of water, the oceans being trapped in the crust. I would be, again, picking a number, guessing, but I would say about 10 miles down, under the crust of the earth, the rocks, the dirt, etc., there would be trapped water. That would come shooting up when the fountains of the deep broke open. So most of the flood water to destroy the planet came from inside the earth, and just a little tiny bit came from the rain. It rained 40 days and 40 nights, but if you read the Genesis 6, 7, and 8 story of the flood, the water kept coming up for 150 days. So it's not all coming from rain. If the water under the crust would escape to the surface, this would do several things. One, the cracks along which the earth broke open are probably still here today, called the fault lines. That's probably where most of the water came gushing out. It would have enough pressure with 10 miles of rock, and the earth's 8,000 miles in diameter. But with 10 miles of rock on top of water, it's about, I think, about 30 tons per square inch of pressure. So that would, oh, hang on, we got to pause if we can. I'm still broadcasting as Stephen Lynn, the techno guy. I need to switch that over. Hold on 1 second, please, okay? Hang on, here we go.
That's weird.
He left the hangout.
They come back with Kent Hovind, I think.
Oh boy. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Back? Cool.
I think we're back on.
It's still, you're still broadcasting, isn't it?
I'm still broadcasting?
Yeah, hold on.
You need to share your screen. Oh, yeah, that's good. So how are you doing?
I also wanted to tell him that on his slides, like we could see the overview of it, but we couldn't see each slide. So I was about to interrupt him anyway.
Yeah, I think that's what he's trying to do. Oh boy.
So for those interested, I actually wrote a review of Robert's Noah's Flood presentation on ThereforeGodExists.com.
Okay, so it's no longer you, it's me.
Yes.
It was me all along. Okay. There we go. All right. Anyway, sorry about that technical difficulty. So the flood water was before the flood.
Kent, you need to present yourself, like screen share the content.
Screen share. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Cancel. See, Steve knows which buttons to push. There we go. Application, window, share. Wow. Okay.
Also, Kent, I can see like an overview of all the slides, but I can't see one slide on the screen. I can just see all of them. So I don't know if
he still sees the overview. He doesn't see one slide on the screen. Stop sharing. He sees that apparently.
Yeah, can you see what you're sharing? Because when I present you can see what you're presenting.
Steve cannot hear this, and he's doing the buttons here. I see my slides just fine.
No, did you want to show individual slides or all the slides?
Yes, yes, individual slides.
Right. So you need to open one particular slide and move on from that.
Open one slide and move on from there. Correct. That's what I was going to do. Yeah, we're working on that.
There you go.
Just pick one. Which one?
There.
Now they can see the whole screen, or they see.
That's what they see now.
Okay.
Yep. So you can see that.
You see the layers of rock from
It's in this window.
Arkansas, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So my position is that the water that was under the crust of the earth came shooting up to the surface during the flood. This would cause numerous things to happen. It would probably launch things into orbit. We probably would have rocks and debris shot out at escape velocity, 25,000 miles an hour. And we're probably still running into that debris as we go around the sun, like bugs on a windshield. We are probably getting craters and meteors and falling stars from stuff that came from the Earth back at the time of the flood. What's it?
No, go ahead.
Okay, keep going. All over the Earth, there are layers of strata rock, like we see before us here in Arkansas, and I mean, everybody agrees. I think nobody would question that the Earth has these layers of sediment all over. I think the number is 70% of the surface of the Earth. We don't know for sure underwater, but 70% of what we see is indeed on the, hang on now, to advance, Steve, I go down like this.
Yeah, just click on it.
Click on it. Okay, good. Yeah, all right, page down, good. This water, this will also allow the crust of the Earth to sink back into the cavity a few hundred feet maybe, that the water escaping. So you have displaced the mass, since rock is heavier than water. The water is now on top instead of under the rock. That would probably speed the Earth up, like a diver or ice skater pulling their arms in, they spin faster. So today we have a spin of the Earth of 365.2422 times per year. And that's why we have to have leap year and all that stuff to make up for it. Probably the original creation was 360, which is why so many cultures have 360 days in their calendar. So it's sped up a little bit because of the contracting of the mass of the Earth. The Earth wouldn't actually contract, just the weight is redistributed with the rock now being lower from the water escaping. So all over the world we find these layers of rock, and many of them are twisted and contorted. Obviously, if you look at them very closely, you go up on these twisted layers and you'll see there are no fracture marks where they were obviously soft when they bent. Layers and layers of soft rock all bent before they had time to harden. If they were hard when they were twisted, they would have fracture marks in them. And these are literally all over the world, bent rock layers indicating, I think, all the layers of the so-called geologic column were deposited in less than 1 year, and all came from Noah's flood. As it would dry out, here's a shot out the wing of an airplane, out the window of an airplane from Grand Canyon. Sometimes hundreds of yards back from the edge of the canyon, holes develop. Well, that's typical of any drying piece of mud. As it dries out, it's going to shrink and contract. The trapped water would tend to weep out into the sides, and all of a sudden sinkholes appear along the side. So the mountains that would rise up during the flood, the Bible talks about mountains rising up. I think you'll see sedimentary rock on top of mountains, like even Mount Everest. The question about how did different animals get to different places, well, if it was a worldwide flood, there probably would be gigantic ice caps. And in my video number 6, I talk about the Hovind theory. I believe ice clear down to Kansas City, ice caps. There were ice, nobody questions, I don't think nobody questions that. There were ice sheets, even up to 3,000 feet thick, that would take 100 years to melt back. As it melted back, clear up to where it is today, that would raise the ocean levels. And if you look at any map of the world, you'll see that there are 2 distinct parts to the ocean. There is the deep part, which we call the abyss, which averages 12,000 feet deep. Here's a spot down by south of Ireland. You can see on the map it says 15,420 feet. So it gets really, really deep. Most of the ocean's about 12,000 feet deep. But around all the continents, we have a continental shelf, a shallow part. Like if you lowered the oceans today just a few hundred feet, England would not be an island. England and Ireland would be part of France and part of Norway. It'd all be one big continent. I think that after Noah's flood, these ice caps would melt back, probably taking a few hundred years, and the water would rise up, and that explains why we have a continental shelf. Also, the water rising up would begin to separate. Battery is low, please charge now, Steve. It says, I don't know. Hey, Steve. Hey, Steve. I don't know what to do about the battery. Anyway, the Alaska-Russia connection would be huge. I mean, there would be thousands of miles of exposed land you could walk between Alaska and Russia simply by lowering the continent. It said battery's low. Charge now. What does that mean? The lady just talked in my ear.
Just go ahead. Go.
If you raise the oceans a few hundred feet, Appalachia would be an island, and most of the central United States would be underwater. Like Chicago's only 600 feet above sea level. So lowering the oceans would expose the continental shelf and connect Cuba with Florida and with the Yucatan Peninsula. I believe, the Hovind theory would say that after the flood, a worldwide flood, the ice caps melting back would cause the water to fill up deep enough in the Atlantic that it would spill backwards and fill up the Gulf of Mexico, which is why we have the canyon between Cuba and Florida. Mobile and Pensacola Bay, I lived in Pensacola nearly 30 years, is only about 7 feet deep. So it looks huge on the map, but it's really not very deep. Lake Pontchartrain above New Orleans, again, very, very shallow. So if you lowered the oceans just, again, probably 30 feet, Vietnam is connected to Australia. The water's very shallow all around the Indonesian islands. And so that would connect everything. And so people say, how did the kangaroos get to Australia? Well, they hopped. They probably had 100 years to hop over there after Noah's flood. And they would then be trapped by the rising ocean levels. Mount Everest, which is quite a ways from the beach, has petrified seashells on top of it. So yeah, I take the position that Jesus certainly believed in a worldwide flood. The Bible obviously teaches a worldwide flood. And it's absolutely ridiculous for God to tell Noah to build a 550 battery low.
Keep talking.
It would be ridiculous for God to tell Noah to build a 515-foot-long boat if it's a local flood. Tell him to move. I mean, that's a no-brainer. So the idea that it's a local flood, I think, is totally contrary to Scripture and common sense. So that's my position. Okay?
You all done?
Just do it.
Yep, just wondering if that's Kent's opening.
Kent, are you finished?
Kent? Hello?
Hello.
Ken, can you hear me?
Oh my God.
I think they're having technical problems, so you guys can bear with us for a minute. We'll just wait on them.
What is going on? Okay. Put this on for a minute.
Okay.
Just tell me we're having difficulties today.
I'm hearing here either.
Okay, I heard him.
Kent, is
There
that
we go,
your...
here. Okay,
is that
now I
your-
hear you. There.
So you finished with that, Ken?
Yes, sir. I am finished. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties here. According to evolution,
That's
things
right.
get better, but they're not getting better for us. Okay, go ahead.
All right, let me just present myself. And Richard, go ahead.
Okay, Robert, you have 20 minutes.
Okay. So, yep, thanks, Kent, for accepting this discussion. This is technically a recent interest of mine. I decided to...
All right.
Oh, let me just I'll just mute you,
One
Kent.
second, brother. We're having difficulties. We got to pause for a sec.
Okay.
All right, so
Wait.
Robert, you want to wait a minute for them to get back? So
Yeah, I'll just wait. Yeah.
You obviously want them to be attentive to your presentation. So, Robert, what's your favorite color? I've never asked you that.
Cyan.
Oh,
This color here. See this?
most people have something more broad, like blue, red, yellow. But yeah, sounds nice.
If this goes up on his channel, this would be hilarious. This discussion. If only Zachary wasn't here. Neo-Usherianism for the win. That's for sure.
We have 33 people watching right now, so
Yeah, 36.
yeah, I'm following your YouTube channel, and it looks like we have people. So I don't know. Hopefully they have patience to wait for Kent.
Yeah, sorry guys. I myself was running late, but how do I sound? Am I breaking up?
No, you sound Australian. You sound great.
Okay, good.
Hey, Mr. Crust.
There we go. Sorry about the technical difficulty. Go ahead.
All right, Robert.
All right, all good.
I'm not hearing.
Okay, I guess I'll go ahead. Yeah, so I appreciate Ken for accepting this discussion. I want to. Sorry. Let me just mute Ken. All right.
Oh, testing. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Your microphone is muted. It said.
What is it?
It said it's muted. I'm
Ken,
not hearing anything.
Ken, can you hear me? Ken?
Nothing.
Goodness.
Hey, Kent.
Face palm.
Okay, I'm not sure what's going on here. Well, fortunately, Kent didn't take all of his 20 minutes, so all of this time, what we're not actually going over. Like, we still have 1 minute before Ken's opening statement was, like, officially going to be finished. So, we're not actually wasting any time here. We just have kind of dead time, which isn't good. Okay, Robert, so Mr. Crust said in the chat room, where does the word kangaroos appear in the Bible? Maybe you can answer that for us.
Nowhere.
Okay. I'm not sure what the context.
Kangaroos were not on the ark, that's for sure.
I'm not sure what the context of what that was, but yeah, I just saw that question and I wanted to read it to you. Oh, Robert, it looks like I exposed.
Huh?
I said it looks like I exposed you because there are people in the chat room saying, "Hey, his real name is Robert," and yeah, guys, he's Robert.
Yeah, thanks so much, Richard. Thank you. You just you know what? I'm going to present you now. Here you
That's
go.
fine.
This
Hey,
is Richard. Look at this guy. He's freshly shaven. He's got a beautiful smile. Oh, he's put his camera off. But don't worry, he's got a lovely white hat.
Yeah.
All right.
So, Kent, are you there?
You dropped out. Oops. Sorry, guys. Like honestly, I apologize.
They were saying
I'll stop sharing this.
Yeah, they were saying something about the battery. So I don't know if his laptop battery was dying and he wasn't sure what to do about it.
Maybe the laptop's for you. Hey, Ken, can you hear me now?
I heard you the whole time, but you couldn't hear me apparently. So.
No, we couldn't hear you.
Okay.
But we can hear you now, though.
Okay, so let's get started with Robert's opening statement. So, Kent, I think Robert will just mute your mic just so there's no feedback there, and I'll mute mine. And yeah, so.
Okay, I'm going to start. So, yep, I appreciate Kent for accepting this gracious dialogue on Noah's flood. This has been a recent endeavor of mine. It's been a few years in the making, but I had to wait for research literally up until last year, 2016, to put some of the final pieces to the puzzle. And what I'm going to showcase is a localized catastrophe in the Persian Gulf region. And so therefore, all the information that Kent presented would basically be nullified in light of what I'll be presenting, specifically from the scriptures as well. So first and foremost, I'd like to just quickly establish, and by the way, what I'll do is I'll go through these slides very quickly because I only have 20 minutes, but I want to establish the scientific method as an authentic Christian practice that the Bible does actually demand, especially in Romans 12:1, that when you offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, that this is a form of scientific worship, because the word logos there basically means science and rationality and thought. So the church should be the vehicle by which science be the mandated purpose for finding truth. And so this slide basically highlights that summary that God is both the author of the book of nature and the book of scripture. If you want more information on that, I would highly recommend this particular theologian, Thomas Torrance, a trilogy that he wrote, showcasing that the Renaissance and Reformation Europe, the explosion of the scientific method is due to the Christian, psychologically the Christian gospel, and why there was this need for intellectual rigor. I'd also like to showcase a thought experiment that we are speaking about an ancient text, in this case like a Sumerian context, and therefore any reading of the text should comport with an ancient Near Eastern perspective, as well as a 21st century scientific perspective. So we should allow 21st century science dictate what nature showcases us that the world, is and operates. And we should also think about the ancient Near Eastern context of the text in light of the 21st century evidence and see if they make a fit. And so what I showcase here is, this is an ancient Near Eastern depiction of the world, where you have a dome, it's a flat earth with pillars. As you can see, there's Leviathan there, the mountains hold up the dome holds up the waters, God's holy temple is on top of the dome. And so this is an image of what they used to think about. But in the 21st century, we have this particular concept. We have a billion-year chart of epochs of time designating the various stages. And as you can see in this chart, I have designated day 1, day 2, day 3, and so on, to highlight that Genesis 1 actually comports with the flow of time that we understand as well. So Genesis 1 starts off by suggesting that the earth is a water world, and sure enough, when land starts to appear in our modern geological sciences, we know of a supercontinent that we've called Ur that formed 3 billion years ago. And here's a chart to showcase the relatively low landmass in the first era of the Earth, that then had a hyper expansion rate within 1 billion years, from a mere 1% to up to 20% surface area coverage on the Earth. So this rapid increase in landmass. And so as you may know, you have the ranges given all the way down to Pangaea. And this paper in 2007 wanted to showcase that once the landmasses take place in a what's known as a pulse state, it's a pulsed model of continental growth, through rhenium and osmium decays, the landmass will no longer sink or change its shape. So once they appear, they remain quite steady in their location. So they remain fixed in that context. And so Genesis 1 mentions, and specifically Psalm 104 mentions, that you have an initially global water coverage, then tectonic activity, and then no more will the waters cover the earth globally. And David is writing in Psalm 104, speaking about the creation account, which obviously is not about the flood. So in Psalm 104, he says that the waters that initially did cover, the primeval ocean that did cover the entire planet, they will never again cover the earth. And this is before the flood. So if the flood is global, then this contradicts Psalm 104, verse 9. Same thing can be said in Job 38, because Job 38 is a Christian passage. God himself says that he set limits. There's a boundary, there's bars and doors. And he metaphorically speaks about the waves, saying, you may only come this far and no more. And Proverbs 8 is about wisdom speaking, where again, wisdom in this case in Christian theology being Jesus. Jesus says, he set a boundary for the sea so the waters would not exceed his limits. This chart basically is designating a flood that did happen 5 million years ago. It's called the Xanthlian flood. Basically, the entire Mediterranean was flooded within 600 days. And I've designated this as a bigger flood than Noah's flood, because obviously Noah's flood is local. So I'll just skip that. But specifically this page here, I want to highlight that, notice the arrow of the water that we've been studying, the direction of the flow of water, specifically where it starts to flow down the Mesopotamian region here, where the Euphrates River is. This is important because this region down here and this region up here where Mount Ararat is, and down here is the Hijaz Mountains, they're high elevation. So waters would naturally flow in a low region, as you're seeing over here. I think I'll skip these points. Basically, what I'll showcase is that humans originate from South Africa. They migrate north into the Arabian Peninsula, and there's studies done, like this particular study, showcasing that 70,000 years ago, you have humans moving into the Persian Gulf region. And so we can actually pinpoint specifically the 4 rivers that's mentioned in Genesis 2 to highlight where the Garden of Eden is. So let me just go there right now. So here's the Garden of Eden. Here are the 4 rivers, and it matches with the studies in regards to, because we've used space shuttle imagery, radar images from the space shuttle to actually locate the unknown rivers that Genesis mentions. So far, the point of this is we're localizing humanity at the time of Noah. Where are they located? And hence, how vast is the flood? I'll just skip all of this. Oh, and another thing is the Hebrew words kol eretz. So in Genesis 7, when it mentions all the land or all the earth is covered with water, that phrase is kol eretz. And kol eretz is used, for example, with Pishon and Gihon. And if you're thinking that this means globe, then you're suggesting that Pishon and Gihon are global rivers, and obviously that's not the case. This, I wanted to showcase early studies of the Persian Gulf region flooding in over a period of a few thousand years. And so I want to showcase that a paper came in 2015 titled "The Geomorphological and Hydrogeological Evidences for a Holocene Village in Arabia, roughly 13,000 years ago," that this actually happened within 1 year. That, as you can see in this photo over here, this region in blue is actually what flooded near the end of the last ice age. Due to the fact that the ice caps start melting, all the ice caps in the mountains in this region, this entire region here gets flooded. Here's a depiction of that, and let me just skip that. So here's, on the far right, here's a satellite image of the Persian Gulf as we understand it today. On the far left is during the Pleistocene era, when 70,000 years ago, when we're working with the, when the sea levels are low and so on. And then around 13,000 years ago, it's a conjecture, but the possible extent of the flood would go along with the low-lying regions, and hence, as you can see, this is the area that's flooded. Specifically, also, I want to mention the fact that Noah's Ark is actually a base 60 volume.
Robert, I'm not seeing your slides advance on the screen. I'm only seeing there. Okay, there we go.
Oh, can you see it now?
I just see the one that says Genesis 7, the extent of Noah's flood. That's, yeah. I did not see the previous slides. Go ahead. Yep.
Oh, so no one saw that? Like, Richard, were you able to see it?
Yeah, I could see it. So,
okay.
I'll check in the YouTube channel to see if it was showing up there. But okay, go ahead, Robert.
Okay. Yeah. So Sumerian mathematics involved a base 60 number system. So Noah's Ark dimensions should not be taken in base 10. Therefore, Kenham's arc size is actually an impossibility. Develop such a huge boat. It's feasible. You need modern technology to make something out. But when you understand it in base 60, it actually makes a lot of sense, because now you're talking an arc the size of possibly a yacht, and no bigger than that. And so base 60 is heavily engraved, especially with the ages of the patriarchs, like from Adam to Noah. The ages given are actually in base 60, and they're not literal years, so to speak, because this follows the Sumerian king list.
Hey, Robert, sorry.
Yep.
In the YouTube channel, they're saying that your slides are not showing up, and especially right now, I definitely don't see it. You're not sharing your screen.
Okay, let me just see if this works again. Can you see it now?
Nope. Okay, there it is.
Okay. Was it just that I mentioned that you missed it?
I'm not sure. I think it might have been down for a little while.
Okay. That's all right. So another thing to note is that in the Genesis passage, it specifically mentions that the floodwaters reach a height of 22.5 feet. If you're talking about a global flood, you're talking about a minimum of 5,000 meters, which would be the height of Ararat, or 8,000 plus meters for something like Mount Everest. Naturally, that makes no sense. So here we have in the text already a given height, and I've extended Noah's height to roughly 6 feet. Usually people at the time would measure up to 5.2 feet, then conjectured about the deck height, because again, we're working with base 60 numbers here. So the visual distance Noah had was roughly 12 kilometers to the horizon in such a flooding event. But naturally, in the course of a natural disaster, kind of like the Japanese tsunami, in light of heavy downfall rain and so on, the visibility would have gone a lot lower than that. And so from Noah's standpoint, it looks like the entire world is flooded, but actually it's that local region. I also want to showcase that the mountain specifically that the Ark lands is Mount Judy, as evidence from the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the word Urartu is the original reading, not Ararat, because Ararat is far to north, and Mount Judy, or Urartu, is a lot closer to the extent of the flood that I showed in the previous slide. So evidence for this is taken from the Samaritan Pentateuch, the Targums, the Book of Julius. Josephus mentions it, Julius Africanus, Eusebius, the Peshitta, and Epiphanius. And curiously also Ephraim the Syrian mentions Mount Judy in a lot of his poems. Michael Heiser, an ancient Near Eastern scholar, he basically says that the biblical text, so he's concerned specifically with the biblical text and its own evidence for a local flood. And so he says the phrase in the flood narrative that suggests a global event occur a number of times in the Hebrew Bible where their context cannot be global or include all people on the planet. For example, the phrase the whole earth occurs in passages that clearly speak of localized geography. In such cases, whole land or all the people in the area are better understandings. Those options produce a regional flood event if in Genesis 6 to 8, where the phrase occurs. And then he says, Genesis 9:19 clearly informs us that the whole earth was populated by the sons of Noah. Genesis 10 gives us the list of the nations spawned by the sons of Noah, all of which are located in the regions of the ancient Near East and the Mediterranean and the Aegean. So the biblical writers knew nothing of nations in another hemisphere. The Americas are places like India, China, Australia, and the language of Genesis 10 therefore allows Genesis 7:21 to be restricted to only or even some of the people groups listed in the table of nations, and hence that interpretation is consistent with localized flood. And Heiser then agrees with my explanation on Psalm 104, where he says that Psalm 104 appears to forbid a global flood since it has God promising to never cover the earth with water, as had been the case at creation. Also, curiously, we need to take into account the type of species on the ark. So here's a list of Hebrew words denoting the type of species that are saved in the ark. And what we need to do chronologically in the creation account is see how the words correlate with the sixth creation day. So Job 38 gives a list of animals from the lion, raven, goat, deer, donkey, wallops, ostrich, horse, hawk, and eagle that actually fit the Arabian Peninsula. And as you can see in this 2016 paper, rock art imagery as a proxy for Holocene environmental change, a view from northwest Saudi Arabia. This matches the fauna of that region. So you won't have, for example, as Kent might suggest, you won't have dinosaurs on Noah's Ark, because we're talking about the 6th creation day species, not creation day 5, that would actually be speaking about things like Leviathan, and in this case would be the dinosaur. This is just to get into the history of the dinosaurs, but I think I don't have time to get into this. What I will showcase is that early Christians and early Second Temple Jewish scriptures did explain to us that this is a local flood. So the Book of Enoch actually uses phrases like one enclosed area, the whole ground in this enclosed area, and the type of species in this area. And so Enoch says cattle, elephants, camels, and donkeys. This is good because we're talking about a farmer, which is Noah, in an agricultural context where farm animals are associated with this particular catastrophe. So when Ken says to get up and move, you can't really move farm animals through a mountainous region that's in the local vicinity of where the Persian Gulf is. So where they are located, they're stuck. That's the point. Let's see. And also, if the author, purely from a Hebrew standpoint, if he wanted to say the entire world was flooded, he would use the word tevel with eretz. The fact that tevel doesn't even appear in the flood narrative shows that the author wasn't thinking of a global flood. And finally, I'll probably just end it with this, since I think my time is coming up. Peter in the New Testament uses a qualifier with cosmos. He says tote cosmos. And tote cosmos, cosmos has 4 definitions. One of the definitions can mean the race of a particular human being. So when he says tote cosmos, the world at that time was sludged with water. You could literally translate this as humanity as it then was, or humanity at that time was sludged with water. Well, like I've just shown you, humanity was localized in that one region, and humanity was flooded. Obviously, humanity wasn't dispersed out around the globe that was then flooded. How much time do I have left, Richard? You know?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Okay, I think I'll end it with this last slide. So here's a chart to showcase a prediction of a global flood versus a local flood. A local flood would correlate very well, the bottom chart here, the local flood would correlate very well with what we see in the fossil evidence, that humans come last, and so you have land plants, fish, amphibians, and so on, coming down to humans, and very small fossil evidence for humans and so on, because naturally humans come last in the creation account. But if it's a global flood, then the basal layer, the creation basal layer, every species that we see would be equalized with an equal amount of population groups in the fossil record. And so therefore you should be able to find humans alongside dinosaurs and so on in the same layer, if it is indeed a global flood. So but since that's not the case, then the prediction that the flood was global should be rooted out. All right, that's my opinion.
All right, thanks, Robert. I just I checked the YouTube video, and it looks like your slides were presenting for most of it, but there were a few times that cut out. Maybe you want to send your Google Drive or post it in the description or something, so they can kind of check out what. Yep.
I'll do that. Yep.
Okay. And now we'll move on to the rebuttal period. It'll be about 10 to 15 minutes, so however much time you want to take. Kent, you'll go first. You ready?
I am ready. I guess I much prefer shorter openings in one topic at a time, because he brought up 25 topics and there's not possibility to rebut each one. So I would rather go one topic at a time. When he mentioned kangaroos were not on the ark with Noah, I don't know if that was broadcast live or that was during the debate, but God told Noah to bring 2 of each kind. So yes, kangaroos had to be on the ark with Noah. As far as the flood being local in the Persian Gulf and not being able to move farm animals, that's ludicrous. I mean, who was the guy that took the elephants over the Himalaya mountains, or over the yes, animals can be moved anywhere. You can always put them on a boat and float them downstream. So again, I stand by what the Bible clearly teaches. One of the things I saw over and over in the last 20-minute presentation was use of various Bible versions and saying, well, it says in the Hebrew, it says in the Greek. I object to that. We don't have any of those originals left, the Hebrew or Greek. I think God preserved his word for us in the King James Bible. And the King James Bible clearly says it was the earth, not the water. He mentioned, like, for instance, he said Noah's flood was 22.5 feet. Well, that is simply leaving out part of the verse. 22.5 feet above the highest mountain is what it says. Well, if it's 22.5 feet above the highest mountain, 15 cubits, it's no longer a local flood. I mean, that's simple physics 101. Water flows downhill. So you cannot leave out part of the verse or change words to suit your, pet theory. I think that's heresy, and that's dead wrong. I'm going to lead people into serious doubt when there is no reason for doubt. The Bible clearly teaches the flood was worldwide. It was over the whole earth, above the mountains. All the high hills were covered in Genesis 7:19. All the high hills were under the whole earth were covered. And for you to change that and say that means under the ocean or under the seas or whatever it was you had, I think is heretical and scientifically inaccurate and seriously wrong. So if we could go one topic at a time, I would rather defend it that way. But clearly, his idea that these days in the Genesis were long periods of time, this is called the day-age theory, I think has been thoroughly refuted many times. In Exodus chapter 20, God wrote on a rock with his own finger and handed it to Moses, the 10 Commandments. And God said, I want you to work 6 days and rest one, because I created everything in 6 days and rested one. The Sabbath commandment, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. And that's why they rested one. He didn't tell them to work 6 million years and take 1 million years off. It is a clear teaching in Exodus 20, verse 11, and again repeated in Exodus 31:17, that the Sabbath was a sign for the Jews to remind them of the creation week. It was a literal 6-day week. It is silly to think those days are long periods of time for many reasons. There are millions, if not billions, of symbiotic relationships in nature where certain animals require certain plants to live, or certain plants require certain animals for pollination. The Bible says they're created within a few days of each other. That is not a problem at all when it comes to symbiotic relationship. It is a gigantic problem for those who want to believe those days are long periods of time. In Matthew 19, verse number 4, and in Mark chapter 10, verse number 6, Jesus said that the creation of Adam was the beginning of the creation. That's when he made them male and female. In Romans 5 and in 1 Corinthians 15, it tells us clearly that nothing died until Adam sinned. It's man that brought death into the world. With the evolution view and with the view Robert is presenting, death brought man into the world. Complete opposite, polar opposite. God made a perfect world and man ruined it. Robert is accusing God of making an imperfect world with death and suffering and animals killing each other. And that process of death and suffering over millions of years slowly brought man into the world. That is complete heresy, in my humble, totally unbiased opinion. He changed Psalm 104, again, changed the words there. It says the whole earth was covered. I couldn't take notes fast enough, which is why I much prefer to do one topic at a time rather than leave all these topics hanging. Even sometimes one sentence or word at a time would be better. But the Bible, the King James Bible, clearly teaches the whole earth was covered with water. Noah built this boat, it was Mount Ararat. It says that very clearly. In the mountains, plural, mountains of Ararat, which are in Turkey. They're not down in the Persian Gulf. You're on the wrong side of the mountain. As far as humans and dinosaurs not being found together, number one, I don't know that that's true. Who's doing the reporting? Is it somebody who already has a bias? Secondly, I would point out that humans and cows have not found together in the fossil record. Okay, well, that's because humans don't normally hang out with cows. And the animals, if there's any sorting, I cover this in great detail in my video number 6, if there's any sorting at all to the fossils found in the ground, it could be for other obvious reasons. Clams are generally found at the bottom and birds are found at the top. Okay, what does that mean? Well, to the evolutionist, that proves clams slowly evolved into something else and slowly became birds. That's one interpretation. The other more logical interpretation is clams are found at the bottom because they're the first ones to be buried in a flood. They're already at the bottom. That's where they live. So the animals could be sorted in this imaginary geologic column based upon their habitat or based upon their mobility. Clams can't run very fast, and birds can fly till they run out of gas. Maybe they're sorted based upon their body density. Clams are heavier than bird feathers, and of course birds are going to float. So birds are buried on top because they float after they die, and so they would be buried on top. They could be sorted based upon their intelligence. You know, clams aren't too smart. When something happens, they clam up, so they would be buried alive, and when they died, couldn't even open. How do you explain millions, if not billions or trillions even, of petrified clams in the closed position found all over the world? There's a place here in central Alabama where they're 4 feet thick. 4 feet thick layers of petrified clams in the closed position. I have hundreds of them in my museum in Lenox, Alabama, which we're building. So I think the evidence from science, the evidence from geology, the evidence from scripture certainly, and the evidence from common sense is obvious. There was a worldwide flood. I do believe the Mediterranean filled in later, and that's interesting. I will watch that Zanclean flood information you gave, and that would fit exactly with what I said. As the ice caps melted back, it would take several hundred years probably. The ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, would fill in deep enough to backfill the Mediterranean from the Straits of Gibraltar. And I believe the Mediterranean filled in, and then it overflowed between Italy and Africa, and filled in the Eastern Mediterranean, and then probably filled in later the Black Sea. So that would have filled in, who knows when, a couple hundred years after the flood. Cities are found underwater in the Black Sea. Okay, well, they had time to build some cities. There's no evidence of anybody drowning or dying in those cities. They just had to abandon their cities. The water came up. If the oceans came up today, 50 feet, all kinds of cities would have to be abandoned and nobody would drown. They would just leave, and we would then find their cities underwater. So underwater cities off the coast of India, in the Mediterranean, in the Black Sea, I think are clear evidence that this filling of these of this area with water did take place well after the flood. Of course, there's always the possibility that some of these cities are pre-flood cities. I don't know, but certainly it's easily explained with the Bible teaching of a worldwide flood. Noah building an ark with 2 of each kind of animal, not 2 of every species. And yes, he would have taken dinosaurs on the ark. There are only about 30 different kinds of dinosaurs. There are 800 different names because everybody's trying to become famous for finding a new dinosaur. But about 30 basic kinds of dinosaurs, maybe less than that. And Noah, being 600, would be smart enough to know you don't have to bring the biggest ones. You bring babies of everything, baby giraffes, baby elephants. The biggest dinosaur egg ever found is smaller than a football. If you know of one bigger, please tell me and I'll change my seminar. But as far as I've been able to find, the biggest dinosaur egg ever found is smaller than a football. And reptiles generally don't take care of their young. They're on their own from the time they're born. So Noah could easily take 2 real tiny dinosaurs of every kind. Some may not have survived after the flood because the climate was different. If you look at Genesis chapter 10 and 11, after the flood, you see the lifespans drop off rapidly from 900 down to 600 to 400 to 200. All cultures, all ancient cultures in the world have a legend about a golden age when man used to live to be 1,000. And it was not base 60. They really did live to be 1,000. If you want to go base 60, look at Genesis chapter 5 and explain to me how 2 guys in that list are 65 years old when their son was born. Does that mean they're 2 years old when they become a father? If you're going to be consistent, let's be consistent. If you're going to divide those numbers by 10 to get them down to a smaller number to fit your theory, well then divide that by 10. They're not 5.5 or 6 years old when they become a father. That's biologically not possible, to my understanding. I taught biology for years. If you know of a 5-year-old father, I'd like to see that and how that was accomplished. So I think the scripture is very clear on its surface. We don't need anybody to give us the Greek or Hebrew, which doesn't exist anyway. and tell us what this is supposed to mean. Like nobody for all these centuries could have possibly known the truth until Robert comes along or somebody like him to tell us what it means. And now we're all supposed to follow him. Oh, give us truth. Anyway, that's all the time I need. I think position the Bible is correct. The earth is 6,000 years old. The flood was worldwide, and that's clearly what the Bible teaches. Okay.
Okay. Thanks for that rebuttal, Ken. Robert, you're up. You've got 10 to 15 minutes. Go ahead.
Yep. So I've been taking notes. I think the first one. So the first one note I was able to write down here is dino bones from the flood. Well, I've already established that the flood did take place in the Persian Gulf, as you can see over here. Or any form of dinosaur influence that the flood has is a misnomer of what the evidence is showing, that indeed in this region there was a flooding. So that point is moot. Secondly, the Bible teaches that the earth is 6,000 years old. Nowhere does the Bible teach that. Genesis 5 is not a chronology to use for that. The days in creation are, they don't have the definite article before the word yom. So therefore, yom, one of the characteristics of yom is it can mean a long period of time. So you're speaking about 6 epochs of time, which, as I show over here, basically correlate very well with what we know in natural history. And curiously, humans come right at the last. Day 5, you have winged animals and so on, and the emergence of dinosaurs, and birds obviously are dinosaurs. So that actually fits right in line with day 5. So Kent needs to acknowledge the Tananine, which would be the dinosaur figure, well before any humans come on the scene. 2 Peter 3 and scoffers, well, yeah, 2 Peter 3, actually, so Peter actually showcases that it was the race at the time of the flood that was deluged, and so therefore 2 Peter 3 actually confirms my model. The canopy theory, well, the canopy theory makes no sense because you're talking about, first and foremost, a complete greenhouse effect that can take place where you don't actually need the flood, a global flood, to kill off life. The canopy can actually kill off, all life on Earth. So therefore, why would you need the canopy to exist? The canopy explains nothing. Either the canopy will dissipate to space, or you're just going to cook the planet. It's one of the two. Or actually, you may even freeze the planet because, the liquids can actually absorb the heat from the Earth itself. And also, quite curiously, Basil in the 4th century, he says that we must not, as you can see here, we must not believe that the canopy resembles frozen water or any other matter produced by the filtration of water, as, for example, rock crystal. And then he says we cannot compare the firmament to one of these substances. To hold such an opinion about celestial bodies would be childish and foolish. So I think he's right that, believe it or not, this crystal canopy idea, which Kent mentions that Josephus talks about, is technically a Greek idea, not a Jewish idea. And Basil, a Christian, is responding using Genesis 1, saying that it's childish and foolish to even suggest such a proposition. So I hate to say this, Ken, but what you're doing is you're allowing Greek ideas to influence the Jewish hermeneutic. And I don't think that's fair. You speak about underground waters, aquifers, and so on. Well, yeah, I suggest that the Arabian Peninsula is where the region the flood happened. It has an underground aquifer. Then you mentioned 360 days in the original culture. Well, no, that's wrong. The Sumerians were well aware of 365 days in a solar year. And curiously, when you look at Enoch, his age is 365. And so therefore, this matches with the, what do the numbers mean in Genesis 5? And that is, it correlates with the character of the person. So Enoch was known as a teacher of astronomy in ancient cultures, like when you look at the Sumerian equivalent of Enoch. Even in Jewish context, when the book of Enoch was written, all about that book is astronomy. So therefore, the code name or the code number given to Enoch is 365 because it's the solar year. Look at Lamech, 777, or look at Methuselah, 969. Methuselah's number triangulates down to 153. 153 happens to be the fish that Jesus fishes out in John 21. So these numbers, and especially in the last point when he said that it's not base 60, look at all the numbers, and in the ones place, they all have a common value of 0, 2, and 5. No amount of, you can't tell me that coincidentally they all match exactly the ones placed during when they give birth, when they have children, or when they die. It makes no sense. Then you mentioned ice caps, ice age, supposed local Persian flooding. Well, you said ice caps, ice age, supposed the global flood. I'm saying it supports the local flood view. Then you said Jesus and the worldwide flood. Well, Jesus never said it. He did say that he did actually speak about, in my opinion, evolution in Mark 10, because he doesn't mention Adam and Eve. He mentions at the beginning of creation of male and female species that eventually will then lead into, in this case, human beings, and then the ethic of the marriage associated with that. So I don't know where you get the idea that Jesus defended a global flood. 22.5 feet above the highest mountain. Well, the word for mountain is har, and har basically means an elevated position. And you're basically suggesting that that no one knew about Mount Everest. I'm sorry, he's in the Persian Gulf. And so to suggest that they know how to measure the height of the water from the highest mountain, you're telling me that Noah must have taken his ark and positioned itself directly above the mountain to then know, oh yeah, right now it's 22.5 feet above an already 8,000 meter high mountain. That makes no sense. 22.5 feet actually matches the topography of the Persian Gulf region. It actually matches the elevation of the certain hills in that region. And so therefore, obviously, it's a local flood. Tell Noah to move with the farm animals. No. Again, I ask you to show me where in the ancient Near Eastern culture, or even in the modern Middle Eastern culture, where they actually move, farm animals like cows and so on. They actually move them across mountaintops. You won't find it. Exodus 20:11. Well, the preposition in Exodus 20:11 is in italics in the King James. That's a hint to suggest to you that grammatically, when it says for in 6 days, if you don't have the word in there in the Hebrew, it basically means for 6 yoms is an undisclosed period of time. So for 6 undisclosed period of time, God makes heaven and earth. And then that becomes a pattern to model for a 6-day week and a 6-year period for the crops. So notice you have 6 days you'll work, you'll rest 1 day. Same thing with the crops. You'll work them for 6 years and rest them 1 year. So therefore, it makes no sense for God to literally work 24 hours, like as if he has a God clock on him, and he's timing himself in his creation. And then somehow that's modeled into the human ethic. I think God is not subordinate to time. So let's see. Romans 5, death into the world and so on. Well, compare with Romans 8, because Paul wants to argue spiritual death towards Adam and the race. And Romans 8, he says, in verse 19, he says, the creation, speaking of Genesis 1, the creation was subject to futility and entropy and death, but not by anything it did. He very carefully clarifies himself in verse 19. Therefore, as you like to say, that humans bring about, because humans are the creation, they bring about death into the world. No, death was already there. And you see this in Genesis 1 with the Leviathan monster and the chaos symbology of the chaotic waters in verse 2 in Genesis 1. You then speak about the species on the ark. Well, like I showed you over here. Let me just go to it. So this is the type of species that was known to the people at the time. This does not match with any form of species like the polar bear, the kangaroo, the emperor penguin, the dinosaurs. Job 38 is about what was happening in day 6 of creation, specifically in this part here, and the species that the early Jews knew that Noah took on the ark matches this list. They did not think about kangaroos, polar bears, and so on going on the ark. The Zanclean flood was to showcase a humongous flooding that would happen after 1,000 years. As I say here, during hot and dry climates, it took 1,000 years for the sea to evaporate almost completely. And because of the Gibraltar Strait and the depth involved with this region here, when this gave way, the Atlantic spilled into this, and the spilling was of such a huge magnitude that you're talking about 291 millimeters per hour. And so, 100 million cubic meters per second of water coming in. And so the reason why I brought this up is to showcase the direction of the flooding, because I'm arguing again that the Persian Gulf region here is where the Garden of Eden is located, which would mean Noah and so on are located here, and this region is affected. Here's a piece of evidence to show that 5 million years prior, the same direction of where the water is flowing is in the direction that would have happened when Noah was around. It's in the reverse direction towards the north here. Then you mention Mount Judy. Mount Ararat, and I'm saying Mount Judy. Well, it's based on the fact that the text actually says that, and tradition actually says that. So in this middle photo, if water is flowing in this way, then naturally the boat will float where the river or the water is flowing in the particular direction. And so notice, to a maximum altitude of where my mouse is, this would be where Mount Judy is. Mount Ararat is far too north. And so yes, I would concede, if you're speaking about Mount Ararat as being where the ark lands, then yes, I would have to concede that it's a global flood. But the text doesn't say Mount Ararat, it says Urartu in the Dead Sea Scrolls and so on. And tradition, the early Christian tradition, held to Mount Judy. No one held to the tradition of Ararat.
Hey, Robert, you want to redo your screen share again? Because it looks like on the YouTube channel it just went down. So just redo it.
Okay, how much time do I have left?
3.5 minutes.
Okay. And yeah, I think I'll probably end it with this last part about the kinds. So you said that 2 different kinds and so on. The Hebrew word is min, and the Septuagint Greek equivalent is genos. Both mean species, because min and genos are associated with different types of species. For example, in Leviticus, different types of species of bat. And it mentions you can't really mix certain types of species. Curiously, though, the word is used with respect to languages. When Paul speaks about different tongues, different kinds of tongues, the word is genos, and as you know, languages evolve. From ex nihilo, they just appear. So that same understanding of just how a language evolves from a prior language, so you have genetically a type of species evolving from another species. And curiously, the Septuagint, which would be the Greek, so the 70 scribes, Jewish scribes that translated into Greek in 300 BC, they did not use min, naturally, because min is a Hebrew word. They used the Greek word genos, species, in this context. So when you look at Genesis 1, when you look at the species in the flood story from the Septuagint, genos is the way to go, because Greek is a very precise language. Yeah, I think I'll end it with that.
All right, thanks, guys. It looks like now we're moving into the discussion period. So I'm not sure how you guys want to do it, whether you want to do a cross-examination or just open discussion. I think the format just says discussion, so we'll just go with that, just an open format. Kent, you want to begin by coming back on anything Robert said, and then we'll get Robert's response?
Yes, this is why it's so important that we do these debates topic at a time and throw the clock away. The time doesn't matter, because he brought up 20 things. I won't have time to answer all of them. The Bible does clearly teach in 1 Corinthians 15 that Adam was the first man. Jesus didn't use the word Adam when he said the creation of man was the beginning, but 1 Corinthians fills in the blank and says, yes, this was Adam. Secondly, Noah didn't have to go measure Mount Everest. The Bible says in Psalm 104, during the last part of the flood, the mountains arose, the valleys sank down, and the water rushed off. Mount Everest didn't exist until the last part of the flood. It rose up. The Bible clearly teaches the water was 15 cubits, or 22.5 feet or so, above the highest mountains. So you didn't have to measure Mount Everest. We know that the ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. We have no idea where it was built.
Can I just respond to those? Because isn't this like a discussion?
Well, this is why we should go topic at a time rather than with the time.
I meant,
you brought up all these topics. Just respond to them.
No, I was responding to your points. I wouldn't. So this is where you bring up a topic and then we discuss it. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So I'll respond to. I'll respond to your Psalm 104 bit. So 104 is a creation psalm. And David is saying that the initial primeval ocean covered the entire globe. And so therefore God, and in this case David is saying that now that there's a boundary, now that you have tectonic uplifts, now the waters are never going to cover the earth. And so you see this repeated in Job 38, Proverbs 8, and also Jeremiah 5, where God himself says that I'm the one who put the sand as a boundary for the sea, a perpetual barrier alarm that it cannot cross. Why would God say ancient prescribed limit once the land masses appear? And this is all in the context of prior to the flood.
How do you know this is in the context prior to the flood? Who gave you that authority?
Because these are creation passages.
I'm looking at Psalm 104, and I'm going to have to insist, if we're going to debate the Bible right or wrong, that you use the King James Bible. Okay, that's what I defend as being exactly correct. In any court of law,
I can use the King James as well.
Please do. Okay. Psalm 104, verse 5, who laid the foundations of the earth that it should not be removed forever. That is a creation event. Then verse 6,
yes,
thou coverest it with the deep as with a garment, the waters stood above the mountains. That may be a creation event or a flood event. Verse 7.
No, because that's Genesis. That's Genesis 1 was 2.
It said, well, true, the earth was covered with water in the creation, but
exactly.
Verse 6 may be describing Noah's flood. You don't know
Not
that.
At all.
Verse 7.
Not at all.
Verse 7, at thy rebuke they fled, at the voice of thy thunder they hasted away. The water rushed off. They go up by the mountains, they go down by the valleys unto the place that thou hast founded for them. Thou hast set a bound that they may not pass over. And I think we have beaches all over the world. The beach stops the ocean from coming up too high.
What day in Genesis 1 does that match, that the waters flee and the mountains rise up? What day does it match?
You're the one saying it goes to Genesis 1. I'm saying it might go to Genesis 6 and 7 about the flood.
But what about day 3?
Day 3 is when he made the dry land appear.
Exactly. So that's what David's saying over here.
So
this is not the flood.
My point is, Psalm 104 may be referring to the creation. It may be referring to the flood of Noah. It may be referring to both.
It's not. Because David,
we have to have you to tell us that. Who are you?
I can say that because of the scholarship that's gone into Psalm 104, and especially in the context of the Atom creation hymn from Egypt. So David, what he's doing is he's giving a polemic against the Egyptian hymn by saying from Genesis 1 in creation, and he's refuting the creation hymn of the Egyptian Atom hymn. And so basically he's saying that, as you just read from verse 5, that you have the foundation of the earth taking place, then you have the initial conditions of the earth, which is a global primeval ocean, then you have day 3 mentioned, which is the mountains rising up and the valley sinking, and now that you have ground appearing, David himself says, you have set a boundary they cannot cross, they the waters, and cover the earth. So he's writing this knowing that a flood happens in Genesis 6 and 7. And if the flood is global, then David is contradicting.
No, if Psalm 104:9 is indeed not referring to Noah's flood, you're creating a contradiction that doesn't exist.
That contradiction
God-
doesn't exist because Genesis 7 to 9 doesn't teach a global flood. That's the point.
It does. They go up by the mountains, they go down by the valleys. If it's up over the mountains, it's a worldwide flood. Plus, if you
Where
read
does it
later in that passage, he talks about the
in
birds, the
Genesis?
springs.
Where does
He
it say
watereth the high hills, the rain. This whole chapter is covering both events, the creation and the flood. The earth was destroyed. And if you read Genesis 6 and 7, it's very clear to anybody with one eye and half a brain that this is describing the whole earth as being flooded. It is not a local flood.
specifically which verse in Genesis 7?
I don't have my Bible in front of me here, but I cover this in my video number 6 of my seminar. Let's take one topic next time. Let's do another debate and pick one topic only. And
Because I can show you, if you go to Genesis 7:19, because this is a favorite verse used to defend the global flood, that the flood waters surged even higher throughout the earth until all the highest mountains under the whole sky were covered. Well,
You're
guess
not reading
what?
King James. Hey, you're not reading King James. Read it in King James.
I prefer the Hebrew text.
You don't know. The Hebrew has been long gone. You have no clue what the Hebrew. Nobody has seen this original Hebrew.
Actually, sorry, sir, but the Hebrew is well established since we can understand Ugaritic now, and Ugaritic is the parent language to Hebrew. So I think the scholarship is well established in this
is that
regard.
God preserved His words in the King James.
But I haven't finished my point. The point is that phrase "under the whole sky" is used only 3 times in the Old Testament in Hebrew. It appears in Genesis 7, it appears in Deuteronomy 2, and it appears in Deuteronomy 4. Specifically in Deuteronomy 2 and 4, it's only dealing with the local region of the Table of Nations that we see in Genesis.
Okay.
Because God is the one who gives every nation subordinate spirit beings that, quote unquote, the entire array of the sky is for this particular region. And so therefore, when you look at Genesis 7, you can't suggest at all grammatically that the entire world is denoted with the phrase "under the whole sky," because that's not the case elsewhere that it's used. It's just all it's saying in Genesis 7 is this entire region that you're under is being flooded, and that's exactly the point of the Persian Gulf.
Well, let me just read it to you from the King James. Genesis 7, verse 18. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered.
Yeah.
15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth. This is not a local flood, Richard, or Robert. I mean, this is a worldwide flood. Now, I don't care what Hebrew scholar you're reading. I don't care.
No, not at all. Because
nobody has seen this Hebrew
Ken,
you're talking about.
Ken, what you've done is
there are thousands of samples of Hebrew language.
Ken,
yes.
You've isolated the text. If you were to read verse 19 just the way it is, ignoring the positioning of when humans were migrating to, the type of animals, the species in the region, and so on. If you just read verse 19 alone, yeah, you could read it as a global flood.
And verse 20 and 21. All flesh died that moved upon the earth. That's verse 21.
Right. Earth here being very generic. But if you want to mention a complete globe, guess what? You'd have to use the word tevel. And guess what? Tevel is used elsewhere in the Old Testament. The fact that tevel doesn't appear in the Genesis narrative means it's not a global flood.
You're missing the point. I can
because
read it very
doesn't
clearly
mean
in English. I read English very well, okay? The waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered.
Yeah.
What part of that don't you understand?
Robert, why don't you explain what you mean by generic earth? Like you mean land. Why don't you explain that?
Yeah. So eretz just means it. I could say my garden is the eretz, or I could say if I really wanted to stretch it, I could say the back in Australia, like this extensive piece of land, this real estate is eretz. Notice I'm not giving any particular geometrical perspective to the word, because the word can't do that. If you want to give it a geometrical perspective as to I'm speaking about literally everything. You use the word tavel. The Psalm 24 here, when the Hebrew scribe, or in this case the psalmist, wants to establish what he's saying theologically, so he says the earth and everything in it exists for the Lord. But notice, eretz can be very generic. So when he uses the word tavel, so the tavel, the world, and those who live in it, now he's establishing, you're talking about the entire planet. The fact that tavel doesn't appear in Genesis 7 showcases eretz in that context. So you can't just isolate verse 19 specifically in Genesis 7 and suggest, oh, this means it's a global flood. You've completely ignored what I mentioned earlier about the migration of humans, the type of species of animal at the time, the size of the ark, the positioning of the fact that the water is 22.5 feet. You've ignored all that data and you've isolated this verse. Go ahead.
Kent, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I understood you clearly, and I completely reject it, Robert. It's not just verse 19. All of chapter 7 of Genesis, all flesh died that moved upon the earth, verse 21. All in whose nostrils was the breath of life that was in the dry land died, verse 22. Every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping things, fowl of the heaven. They were destroyed from the earth. Noah only remained alive, and they with him in the ark. Verse 24, and the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. You're telling me the Persian Gulf region is going to stay underwater for 150 days, and it's not going to run off anywhere. Water runs off. You have a flood, it doesn't last for 150 days like that. I don't know where you got this stuff. But you need to get your money back for that education.
The curious thing about Genesis 8 is that it says that the waters, when it says that a wind came and basically cleared off the waters, that actually would work on a flat plain. And the Persian Gulf is exceedingly flat. Secondly,
it doesn't say that. Again, you're not reading from a right Bible. In Genesis 8, it says, God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. It does not say dried up. It says they assuaged. Verse 3.
Yeah, I'm talking about
movement continually.
I'm talking about movement and evaporation of water. But notice here, King James.
No, it's not talking about evaporation. You're adding that. It says it assuaged. The waters dropped or sank down. The whole crust of the earth would shift positions.
Not at all. The physics doesn't denote that at all. The Japanese tsunami suggests that the global flood model is impossible. But let me just
let's let the audience hear that one more time. The Japanese tsunami says the global flood is impossible.
Yes,
that's what you're saying.
Yeah, because what happened with that fault?
You really believe this stuff, don't you?
Yeah,
you said earlier,
I'm a physicist. It works.
You said earlier, birds obviously are dinosaurs. You really believe that, Robert?
Yeah, the Bible teaches that. Like I was about to show you.
The Bible teaches that birds are dinosaurs. Where did you get this information?
In Genesis 1 verse 20, because in Genesis 1:20 it says that the waters will bring forth reptiles and winged creatures, birds. And Basil.
Actually, interestingly, that's even more clear in the KJV. Like in the modern translations, it doesn't really come out.
Okay, guys, but we started late for we started late for technical problems. I have another appointment at 1 o'clock, and I got a half-hour drive to get there, back at the camp. So we're gonna have to quit and reschedule this. But there are 100 things I would love to be able to, like he said, the canopy may cook the whole planet. Then in the next sentence he says, or it may freeze it. Come on, Robert, think this through. Let's pick one topic at a time. Which one do you want to talk about next time? Let's have another debate.
The canopy theory is simple thermodynamics. Any physicist who understands thermodynamics will understand exactly what I meant by it.
How could you give contradictory statements and say it could cook it or it could freeze it? Is the third option maybe it could
because
be
what happens?
Could it be?
What happens?
There's a third option, Robert. It could. What
happens? Right. What happens when heat is transferred into liquid?
You talk about the latent heat of condensation. We're half hour over the time scheduled for this, and I have to go. But is that what you want to talk about?
Can we have 5 minutes closing?
You go ahead.
Oh, 2 minutes.
You go ahead. 2 minute closing. Right. Side, yeah.
In the last point, what I wanted to mention is the fact that, because notice Kent mentioned from Genesis 8, the cattle in Noah's Ark. So that's brilliant. Thank you for that, because that proves my point that the type of species that are saved in the Ark, and here's the list of species here, the Basar, the Behemoth, and so on, category of farm animals, not polar bears, not emperor penguins, and so on. And curiously, the type of species that are not saved in the Ark would be the mundane type of species that negligent. A farmer will not bother with these type of species. And again, it's the species of the common land in the Persian Gulf. Therefore, any notion of dinosaur makes absolutely no sense. No Jew thought of a huge reptilian-like creature on Noah's Ark, especially when I showcased, in this case, the book of Enoch, for example. And you may be thinking of the book of Job with Leviathan and Behemoth. Well, actually, Behemoth and Leviathan are both the hippopotamus and the crocodile, as you can see here in this Egyptian hieroglyph. These are not dinosaurs. And I think I'll end it with that point.
Okay. Bible says very. Am I muted here? No. Okay. The Bible says very clearly in Genesis 7, verse 21, and all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both fowl and cattle and beast, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, and of all that was in the dry land died. Of course, this didn't affect the fish. They don't live on dry land, and they don't have nostrils. Verse 23, every living creature was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground. Man and cattle, the creeping thing, and the fowl of the heaven were destroyed. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. Chapter 8, verse 1. And God remembered Noah and every living thing, and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. It's true, the Hebrew word cattle, or the word cattle to a Jew, means almost any animal that walks on four legs. Okay, but still, it's all the living things. The reading of the scripture could not be more clear. You are a classic example, Robert, of 2 Peter chapter 3, where the scoffers are willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood. God created everything in 6 literal days. That's the only thing that works biologically, where so many animals depend upon each other. And there was a global flood. There are fossilized clams on top of Mount Everest. Something happened and Mount Everest rose up during the last part of the flood. What you really ought to do is watch my video number 6. It covers all these very same questions, and we could get you converted over. I think with all the research you do, you'd make a great young earth creationist when you get done climbing the mountain of truth. We'll be waiting for you there at the top.
I would happily be debunking the neo-Ashurian model, Kent. So if you would like to continue this discussion for a part 2, I'm more than happy to do that.
Me too. Let's do it. Contact Rhonda, the secretary, 855-BIG-DINO, and pick one topic. And we'll just, even if it's only 30-minute debate, and then we'll pick one more topic for the next one. But I can't possibly prepare for you to cover 50 topics, and I can't cover them all. So let's do one at a time. Pick your favorite.
Would you be up for a KJV only debate?
Absolutely. It must be King James.
Okay.
Oh, so would you be?
That's what I'm defending.
Kent, would you be up? I'm up for that one as well. Would you have a debate specifically on the King James that you can prove to us? No, that you can prove to us that the King James is indeed the inspired word of God.
So rather than on create, you're debating
no, we can,
the flood.
No, for example, we can have a flood
using other. I'm just saying, if we're going to debate the creation or the flood, we only use the King James to prove the point. Because if we have to have you to understand what the Bible says, we're all in trouble.
But Richard's asking, is it possible, like, since you're public here, if you're willing to have an actual debate specifically on the King James translation of whether the King James is legitimate or not?
There are probably people who are better qualified than I for that one. My specialty is creation, evolution, and the flood.
Yeah, but since you hold to it, I suggest to us you have some evidence. Yeah, but it suggests to us that you have some evidence to defend the King James, right? So maybe you can do it.
There are 300 or 400 students at Bible Baptist Church in Pensacola who that is their specialty, and that's what they would probably be more apt to defend it. I'll give you a qualified yes, I probably would, but that is not the focus of my ministry. I'm saying if you're going to attack the creation account, only attack it in the King James.
Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, I got to go. Thank you, fellas. Let's do this again.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. See you later, Ken.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, Robert, we're still live, so if you want to say goodbye to your audience.
All right, guys. There you go. It's technically like 1:30 in the morning for me at the moment. I hope I was clear. A lot of content I had to obviously go through, but at least in some sense, I think I'm satisfied with what was mentioned.
I think
Thanks.
your Google Drive somewhere, right?
Oh yes. So what I'll do is once this is published, I will upload in the description link the particular link to this PowerPoint presentation. And because I appeal to peer-reviewed scientific research, so there's a lot of good peer-reviewed stuff that I've been collecting to advocate for a local flood in the Persian Gulf. So, and peer review, he requires me to do something, so here goes. Yeah, boy. And a all right, anyway, it's a little bit of a meme thing. Richard, do you have anything else to say?
No, not on live, maybe after, because I don't want to poison the well.
All right, ending it now. See you guys.